Political ideologies. Philosophers who contributed much in liberalism. John Locke, regarded as the father of modern liberalism, was the first to develop a liberal philosophy, including the right to private property and the consent of the governed. Originated the concept of the separation of church and state based on social contract and principle. Argued that the government lacked authority in the realm of individual conscience, as this was something rational, people could not cede to the government for it or others to control. This created a natural right in the liberty of conscience, which he argued must therefore remain protected from any government authority. John Stuart Mill, a British philosopher, political economist, and civil servant, one of the most influential thinkers in the history of classical liberalism. He contributed widely to social theory, and political economy. Dubbed the most influential English-speaking philosopher of the 19th century, Mill's conception of liberty justified the freedom of the individual in opposition to unlimited state and social control. John Stuart Mill contributed enormously to liberal thought by combining elements of classical liberalism with what eventually became known as the New Liberalism. Mill's 1859 On Liberty addressed the nature and limits of the power that can be legitimately exercised by society over the individual. He gives an impassioned defense of free speech, arguing that free discourse is a necessary condition for intellectual and social progress. Mill defined social liberty as protection from the tyranny of political rulers, introduced a number of different concepts of the form tyranny can take, referred to as a social tyranny and tyranny of the majority, respectively. Social liberty meant limits on the ruler's power through obtaining recognition of political liberties or rights and by the establishment of a system of constitutional checks. Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes theorized that government is the result of individual actions and human traits, and that it was motivated primarily by interest, a term which would become crucial in the development of a liberal theory of government and political economy, since it is the foundation of the idea that individuals can be self-governing and self-regulating. His work Leviathan did not advocate this viewpoint, but instead that only a strong government could restrain unchecked interest. It did, however, advance a proto-liberal position in arguing for an inalienable right of nature, the right to defend oneself even against the state, though his own ideological position is open to debate. His work influenced Locke, Hamilton, Jefferson, Madison, and many other liberals, leading Strauss to identify Hobbes as the father of liberalism. Dr. Jose P. Rizal. Rizal's thinking revolved around the ambit of liberalism. He had already cultivated liberal ideas by heart, even long before the Filipino intellectuals of the 19th century Philippines embraced it during the Spanish rule. Indeed, his liberalism was solely responsible for what he is today, being acclaimed as one of the greatest Filipino heroes. It was his liberal ideas, as the main culprit, that led his life into the grave, but put him in the pantheon of great Filipino heroes. Rizal's writing ability became his tool to spread the beauty of liberal principles for his countrymen, and in particular the puzzle of intellectuals of his days. His ideas were so powerful and captivating that touched the conscience of many ordinary people of his time. These were the very ideas that caught the attention of the Spanish authorities, not only because of their nationalistic fervors, but also because of their political values. One striking example of Rizal's early writing that undermined the Spanish policy was a poem written in 1875 entitled Education Gives Luster to Motherland. This poem showed his propensity to promote the importance of education for the country. This was contrary to the unwritten policy of the Spanish authorities, who wanted to limit the access to education only for a few aristocratic families in the Philippines during those times. In his winning point to the Filipino youth, Rizal called on the Filipino youth of his time to develop their talents and reason in order for them to excel in the fields of arts and science. A closer look at the development of liberalism in the Philippines would give us a glimpse of how it eventually shaped Rizal's thinking, and it all started from the Enlightenment movement that took its roots during the mid-decades of the 17th and 18th centuries in the Western Europe. Rizal believes that the implementation of liberal policies in the Philippines was inevitable. In his essay The Philippines in the Century Hence, published in 1889, Rizal warned Spain that it would lose the Philippines to Imperial America if it failed to reform its policies on the natives. His prophecy finally proved true by history. Ironically, Rizal's advocacy for liberal reform led him to his fate, but he accepted it without remorse. His execution in 1896 signaled the end of peaceful struggle for liberal reform and the beginning of armed struggle for separation from Spain. But it was the liberal Rizal who molded the separatists to choose death in the name of freedom over life under the evil of tyranny. Bakit ganun? Some issues in liberal theory and practice. Liberalism and cultural difference. Liberalism prides itself on its toleration of cultural and other differences. Some cultural groups, however, are internally illiberal. They do not treat their members as free and equal autonomous individuals with rights but as having identities defined by their membership in the place within the group and by relation to the group's values. They are communal selves rather than individual ones. People so identifying themselves cannot easily flourish in liberal society by taking advantage of its freedoms. Hence, it is said that liberalism cannot treat such minority cultures fairly in accordance with its own principles. Liberalism and women's difference. In the beginning, feminism was just the application of liberal principles to women. Women were conceived as having fundamentally the same nature and interest as men, and thereby entitled to the same rights. Women be seen as a disadvantaged group whose members need preferential treatment in order to achieve fair equality of opportunity. But this is not incompatible with liberalism. Some contemporary women writers claim that it is incompatible on the grounds that if women are given special treatment because of their difference, then liberalism's claim to treat all persons equally without respect for gender will be breached. Nevertheless, because the ground for special treatment is to achieve fair equality of opportunity for different individuals in regard to their different circumstances, this argument seems invalid. Economic liberalism. Economic liberalism is the view that the best economic order is a free market. This view may be justified by utilitarian considerations, as in those of Bentham, or by a combination of natural rights and utilitarian consequences, as in the theory of Adam Smith. Fundamental to Smith's view is the idea of a natural order. This is the social order that develops when individuals are allowed to pursue their interests through specialization and exchange of goods and services. It is an expression of human beings' natural right to liberty, but it is also the best way for a society to promote the accumulation of wealth and national power. The general spirit of economic liberalism is better described as strong presumption in favor of laissez-faire unless it was clear that intervention was to the general benefit. Liberalism and nationalism. Liberalism and the weak form of nationalism developed together. Liberalism was a way of organizing society for the benefit of its members in a manner that promoted, better than any alternative, the society's harmony, prosperity, and power in a world of independent states. The nation here is just a collection of people organized in a state and thereby sharing common interests in their peace, prosperity, and power. A strong form of nationalism holds that a nation is an ethno-cultural group sharing a common ancestry, history, and culture, that the membership in such group is fundamental to the identity and value of the individual. Nationalism in this sense is totally anti-ethical to liberalism, for which individual identity is deeper than national identity. Ultimately, the only justification for pursuing a liberal program domestically or internationally is that liberalism describes a better way for human beings to live together than any alternative, because it better expresses and actualizes their fundamental nature and interest. Thank you.